With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Mem Beis. We're going to begin by focusing on the Shita of Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah that holds that Ta'a B'dvar Mitzvah Potter, someone who errs in the course of attempting to do a mitzvah, even if the person violated B'shoigig, a sin for which B'mezid one would be Chayv Kares. And therefore normally you would be Chayv Chatos for its shoigig violation. Nevertheless, since you violated it while you were taught, while you were occupied, while you were involved in doing a mitzvah, Rabbi Yossi holds that you are pater from a chatos, and what the Gemara will clarify is that this rule, Rabbi Yossi, will stand even if viloi avad mitzvah, which is not exactly the case of the Mishnah. In the case of the Mishnah, the person ended up carrying the Lulav, but at the end fulfilled the mitzvah of taking Lulav, even in a scenario where you did not do a mitzvah. L'Rabbi Yossi, since you were taught b'dvar mitzvah, you're going to be pater from a chatos. The Mishnah on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph is going to be teaching us that during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, like we mentioned, that Lulav was taken when the first day of Sukah falls out on Shabbos. Then one might have thought that a woman who is not obligated b'chlal in taking the lulav, maybe for her the lulav will be muktzah. Tells us the Mishnah that for a woman the lulav is not muktzah. We're going to be learning different phases of katnus as far as it relates to the mitzvah of chinuch. We're going to learn an amazing tosefta regarding different stages of a minor. As of what age or as of what amount of knowledge will he or she be included in which mitzvah? And on Daf Mem Beis, Amud Beis today, we're going to be starting the 4th chapter, Lulav Va'arava. And the theme of Lulav Va'arava is really going to go until the end of the Masechta. The Mishnah is going to list various obligations of Sukkos and give the number of days upon which each one is in effect. And we're going to introduce, at least at the end of today's daf, the famous Gezerah Derabah, which tells us that if Shabbos falls out on Sukkot, and similarly Shabbos Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos Purim, then because of the fear that people might carry B'Reshus Harabim, then Sheva Al Tatzeh, that mitzvah should not be fulfilled. The lulav is not taken, and the shofar is not blown, and the Megillah is not read, and much, much more. We left off on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis at the last line of the Amud. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yamtiv, this is referring back to the Mishnah on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, where Rabbi Yossi says that again, Bizman HaMishnah, even though if Shabbos will fall out, if Sukkot, if any day other than the first day falls out on Shabbos, the lulav was already not taken. But Shabbos falling out on the first day of Sukkot, lulav is taken. Says Rabbi Yossi that if a person, because of their occupation in the mitzvah of lulav, and they're going to take their lulav to a chacham to tell them how to wave it, or to ask someone how to make the bracha, as we already spoke out to Tosfos, it's not so simple to know exactly when do you make the bracha. The bracha has to be made over la'asiyasan. Just lifting it up already fulfills the mitzvah. And so you're going to someone to ask him how to do it, and the person forgot that it was Shabbos and carried, says Rabbi Yossi, that person is potted from a chatos because of the rule of Ta'ah b'dvar mitzvah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'akol nidvarim. Says the Gemara Amar Abaye, Daf Mem Beis, that Lo Shanu, that Rabbi Yossi is lenient, exempting this person from a chatos, is Elo Shelo Yotza Boi. It's only if this person did not yet fulfill the mitzvah of lulav, says the Top Rashi. Lo Shanu, the potter Elo Shelo Yotza Yedei Choivas Netila Koidim Shohoitzioi. He didn't fulfill his obligation. So you can still say that this person is tarud, right? Rashi says, the hashta tarud b'mitzvah. And therefore, we call him a ta'a b'dvar mitzvah. But if the person already fulfilled their minimum obligation, which is taking the lulav, even though they want to know they're going to take it to shul and they're going to do the non-nuyim during Hallow, etc., but they already fulfilled the basic obligation, su loy ta'a b'dvar mitzvahu. You can't say that this person is a ta'a b'dvar mitzvah. V'loy tarud mahashta b'mitzvah la'asoiso. Back inside the Gemara, Avol Yatzaba. Even though now there's a big chiddush here. If you remember, the last thing that we learned in yesterday's shiur was how the minhagam shel ansha Yerushalayim was to carry the lulav with them the entire day. And we spoke out that carrying the lulav with you the entire day is an expression of zrizin b'mitzvahs. Obviously, when you carry the lulav the whole day, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah the whole day, because you fulfilled the mitzvah the moment you took it the first time. So really, even though there is an inyan because of zrizin b'mitzvahs, because of chavivus of a mitzvah, to carry the lulav the whole day, that's not called a mitzvah enough for Rabbi Yossi to give his heter that you were taught a b'dvar mitzvah. Back in the Gemara. And now the Gemara has a technical question on Abaye. Frek the Gemara, how is it even possible for someone to carry the lulav or the dalad minim to a chacham, forgetting that it's Shabbos, and there is a case where Rabbi Yossi says you're pater mechatos? How is that even possible? Ha mida agbehei nafagbei. This is taka similar to the Tosfos that we learned. When do you make the bracha? The moment you pick it up, you're yoitza. And furthermore, like we mentioned, since we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, we do paskin like the Chachamim. Lulav ain't tzarech eged. Even though we do taka put it, you don't need to put it together with the hamachloikas of the Bahag and the Rabbeinu Tam, etc. So l'chayda, if you just pick it up and you're yoitza, so you will always be yoitza prior to you carrying it. You should always be chayiv chatos. So Amar Abaye, it must be that what is the case of Rabbi Yossi, kisha hafachai, that you picked up all of them or some of the dalad minim in the opposite direction from the way they grow. And like Rashi quotes, we're going to have later on Daf Memhei the Chazal that says that ein yoitzin bahem ela derech gidi lasan. And if you hold them in the reversed position of how they grow, you're not yoytze the mitzvah, and you knew that. And that's the way you carried it to a chacham, that you forgot at Shabbos, but you want the dafka not to fulfill the mitzvah until you will be in the shul, or until you'll be in the Sukah in the shul, or according to those opinions who hold that you should take the mitzvah dafka prior to Hallow, etc. Rava Amar, afilu teimek shelo yafachai. On something even more practical, something more common, that you carried the lulav or the lulav and esrig in while they are in a keli. Today would be that the esrig was in an esrig box. 1 second asks the Gemara, Rava gave that answer. Did we not learn just now on Daf Lamed Zayin? Remember that sugya, if you have a scarf around your hand, or if there is something interposing, you have the golden fibers, it's not called a chatzitza, because you ended up taking it. So what difference does it make if you are carrying it bekeli, if at the end of the day you took the dalad minim, you should be yoitze? Answers the Gemara, hold on, not so quick. And when we learned Lamed Zayin, we also said the same concept, what the Gemara is going to say now, Benegei chatzitza. It's not that Rava held that there's never a chatzitza. He felt that if something is considered an accessory to your hand or an accessory to the dalad minim, then it's not a chatzitza. Similarly, when is taking something, even though it's Aliyah de davar acher, still called taking? Hanamila derech kavod. If that which is interposing is there to give reverence to the lulav, like you had the golden fibers, or even if you have a scarf around your hand. In other words, you're dressed bachavadik, then Rava holds you fulfill the mitzvah. Avol derech bezoyan doesn't mean what it normally means, mamish. It's not disgracing the dalad minim. Derech bezoyan means if you have them in a plate, you have them in a bowl, that's called derech bezoyan. I'm saying perhaps putting an esrig in that beautiful silver boxes is not called derech bezoyan. But if you have it in a bag, it's not bachavadik. Then even l'shitas Rava, that's not called taking, because there is some sort of interposition, and therefore that will be the case l'Rava. L'Rabbi Yossi, that if you forgot at Shabbos, since you did not yet do the mitzvah, that's the key, you did not yet do the mitzvah, that is where Rabbi Yossi has a setter that you will be pater from a chatas.
So Rabbi, just to clarify, you're carrying it in a cardboard box, it's not considered bizayon?
I don't think so. I think that box is not derech bizayon, that box was made for the esrik.
Then it is mechifa.
Yes.
Then you would be chayav on carrying it, according to this.
If it's held up derech gidilasen, according to our Gemara, yes.
And so just taking a step back, nothing to do with Shabbos. Today we pick up our Lulav and Esrog in a box or not, and we carry it.
We don't paskin like Ravo, so we don't. Yeah. L'choira.
In the belt, they turn the esrog upside down when they do that.
But that's only, Danny, that's only after they take it out of the box. In other words, when they have it in the box, they're not concerned about it being turned upside down. They don't consider this taking it. Let me go more than that. Our minig is that we don't even turn it upside down. And this has to do with the Bahag and the Rabbeinu Tam. That we hold that even though Lulav ein tzarech eged, it doesn't have to be bound, right? But nevertheless, you fulfill the mitzvah when you put them all together, when they're touching each other. So therefore, our solution is that we don't allow the shlish ha'elyon of the esrog to touch the lulav bundle before you finish the bracha. Towards the end of the bracha, you touch it. Okay, let's go back over here. Now the Gemara has a gewaldike nekuda here. Omar Afuna. I want to add something. Now, even though it's not going to look like an addition, it's a huge addition. Oimer hoyer Rabbi Yosi. This is beyond of what we know already. That what? This is the case that the Rafuna is speaking about. We're going to chazer some rules of kachim. If a bird oila is found in between the wings, what wings are we talking about? It means in between. Chatos, a oilas chatos oif. What's the chatos oif? So there's two types of bird karbanos, and they have very different rules. Focusing on one rule here, that after the avodah is done with the dam of the bird chatos, the bird is eaten by the kohanim. Oilas ha'oif is completely burnt on the mizbeach, aside of some parts that are removed and they are burnt. The mura and some of the feathers, but it's burnt on the mizbeach. Now, even though the chatos, the melika of the bird chatas is dafka done under the chut hasikra, and the melika of the oilas ha'oif is dafka done oila on top of the chut hasikra, and sometimes, and maybe even primarily, they're not done at the same corner, but there are times that one was done right above the other. And whenever the bird oila was done right above, it's above the chut hasikra, but if it's done above the same corner where the chatas bird is done, it's possible that somehow the after you did the avodas hadam on the bird oila, the remains which should be burnt on the mizbeach fell and got mixed with chatas, with the bird chatas. Now, there's a lot of details that have to be spoken out, at least to speak out one more detail, if you remember from Kachim. And that is that when it comes to the melika of the oila, of the bird oila, there, the head has to be completely severed. When it comes to doing melika on a bird chatos, the head may not be completely severed. So, how can they b'chal get mixed up? Would you not see, is the head on, is the head off? So it's important to note that the emphasis of not removing the head from the bird chatos is only before the avodas hadam is done. Once the blood was properly put on the mizbeach, don't forget, the kohanim are not going to eat up the head. At some point, they would remove the head. At this later point, it's possible that the bird oilam and the bird chatos got mixed up altogether. And let's keep on reading this statement that Rabbi Yossi always says, V'chesavar, comes along a kohen who's occupied in the mitzvah of eating up the bird chatos. And he takes that bird thinking it's a chatos or oifi, really it's an oila, and that's a shoygig, ve'achala. Now here it's not about kares and chatos, but if a person, let's say, has benefit from temple property, they're chayiv asham me'ilos. This is a classical case of inadvertent, it's b'shoygig, he thought it was a chatos, but it was an oila. This normally would demand a karba me'ilah. So same Rabbi Yossi says, based on the concept that you were taught b'dvar mitzvah, you're patur. Now, the problem we have is not in this din. We got it. The challenge the Gemara will have right now, okay, we already know that. Our Mishnah gave a case of a person taking the dalad minim to a chacham to inquire and find out certain details, carrying hoitza'ah, or he was havara b'dalad amas b'reshus harabim. So it's the same thing. So asks the Gemara, Michael Mashmulan, what you're telling me again that Torah b'dvar mitzvah patur? Very nice. There's no problem. It's consistent, but hainu hach. Why are you even mentioning this? What novelty do we have here over the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, there's a huge novelty. Because one might have thought only learning our Mishnah. It's interesting. Hassan means here. If we only would have had our Mishnah, who the Tabed Var Mitzvah potted, you know why? Aside of the detail that we began today's share with, La'abaya, Lurava, that you didn't yet fulfill the mitzvah prior to doing the violation, during the violation you didn't do the mitzvah, but there's something else that's important. At the end of the day, this person who forgot it was Shabbos will end up doing the mitzvah of taking the Dalai Minim. In other words, he wasn't only a Ta b'dvar mitzvah. He was Ta b'dvar mitzvah, and then he will fulfill the mitzvah. Hainu da avad mitzvah. Maybe that would be the reason why Rabbi Yossi says he's parted from achatas. But over here, in the case of Rav Huna, in the case where these two bird karbanis got mixed up, not only was this person a ta b'dvar mitzvah, which would be at sad lo hakel on the karbin, but there's another side. V'lo avad mitzvah. Guys, there is no mitzvah eating a bird oila. It has to be burnt. So he never fulfilled the mitzvah. So maybe one would have thought that Rabbi Yossi is not going to be lenient. Ema loy. That's why even in a case where v'loy avad mitzvah, shitas Rabbi Yossi is that ta b'dvar mitzvah spotted from a carbon. Now I have a challenge. We learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yossi yomer hashoiched es hatamid she'ena mavukar kel chasa. If a person shechted a carbon tamid that wasn't properly examined, guys, it's important to remember that 4 days prior to shechting a carbon tamid, they have to be examined. There has to be at least these 4 examinations, not on the same day, 4 days prior. Parenthetically, b'hashgacha pratis, we are learning this right now, Elul Tavshin Pei Aleph, the reason why Ashkenazim, we say slichas 4 days before Rosh Hashanah, that's the minimum, is because of this din. We're, so to say, we're going up, standing in front of God, so we want to make a inner examination 4 days prior. And whenever we don't have at least that amount of slichas, and that's when we begin nach from the Shabbos prior. But coming back over here, so the din is that you have to examine the carbon for blemishes. Now, says the Baraisa that if a person shechted a tamid, this is not new Shabbos. You know, let's say you're tated b'mitzvah. You're so excited to do the mitzvah, you took the animal and it wasn't examined 4 days prior. Now, if you did that shechita on Shabbos, here's the problem. Based on a rule, like Tosfos writes here explicitly, that animal, even if it turned out to be unblemished, that animal was not going to be for the tamid. You're not yoitza. You got to bring another carbon tamid. So the din is, so during the week, it's one thing. But on Shabbos, many actions of shechita, beginning with the shechita itself, is in direct violation of Shabbos. The only reason why we're allowed to do it is because the Torah says that you bring the tamid b'mayadoi even on Shabbos. But since that mitzvah, that animal is not going to help you fulfill your obligation, even on a b'di'evid level, so you're going to be chayav chatos v'tzarech tamid acher. Now here we got a problem. Why don't we say this person was a ta b'dvar mitzvah? I get it that you should have examined the animal for blemishes, and that's essential. But so what? This person was doing what? He was bringing a carbon. This should be the classical tared b'mitzvah. Amalei bar mino dahi. Nah, that's not a question. Take this braisa out. I'll tell you why, because the Ha'itmar Allah, we already clarified that Amar Rav Shmuel bar Chitoi, in the name of Rav Amnuna Sava, in the name of Rav Yitzchak bar Ashion, in the name of Rav Huna, in the name of Rav. Now, you know when Rabbi Yossi said, you're chayiv chatos, only that you took the animal out of a chamber that contains animals that were not examined. In other words, if you would have gone to the right chamber and you, instead of taking from the animals that already underwent a 4-day prior examination, you took it from an animal that did not, that's called a shoygig. But if you went to the wrong chamber, Rashi says it's kind of lemezit. In other words, you can't say, since you didn't do the mitzvah and you're taught the mitzvah, everything you do is not going to be obligated, you're good. Never have to bring a carbon. There is a point where you tell the person, come on, you should have made a little bit more effort, no matter how excited you are from doing the mitzvah, to go to the right chamber. If it's Karav Lemezid, then already you're going to be chayiv chatas. Now, I just want to point out a nuance over here. Don't forget that as a rule in the Beis Hamikdash, for mezids you bechlal don't bring a carbon. A carbon only comes for a shoygig. Here there's a very unusual window. It says on one hand, it's not a mezid. That's why the violation of Shabbos, because you shechted a carbon that's not valid, is going to demand of you chayiv chatas. So it's not that it's a mezid, but it's beyond the ta'ah b'dvar mitzvah heter, because, come on, you should have gone to the right chamber. So you got exactly that window where, yes, even let Rabbi Yossi, you're going to be chayiv a carbon chatas. Okay, Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, mekabeles isha miyad bino umiyad baila. That even though nowadays, even if the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos because of Gzeira D'Rabba, nowadays meaning when we don't yet have a Beis Hamikdash, after the Churban Bayis Sheni, before the building of Bayis Shlishi, we don't take the Lulav on Shabbos, period. But the Zman Beis Hamikdash Kayam, even when there was already the rabbinic rule that if Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, you don't take the Lulav, that was only so other than the first day. When the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos, they would take the Lulav. Now, as the Gemara is going to speak out, one might have thought, who's allowed to take the Lulav? Someone who's obligated to do so. Women that are not obligated in the mitzvah of Lulav, even though they are allowed to opt in, but they're not mechuyev, one might have thought that for them the Lulav is muktzah. Says the Mishnah, rule number one, it's not muktzah for them. If it's muktzah, it's muktzah. If it's not muktzah, it's not muktzah. Since men are obligated to take it, and then they took it. Guys, this is important because nowadays that we do not take the Lulav on Shabbos, even if it is the first day of Sukkot, the Dalad Minim are muktzah. Push it. Why would you be allowed to move it? It was not pre-designated, that's not muchan. But then, not only are men are mechuyev to take it, but therefore it's not muktzah for women, so a woman can receive it from her son or from her husband. That's chiddush number one. Chiddush number two is umachazi rasei lamayim b'Shabbos. She's allowed to put it back in water on Shabbos. Right? We're not planting over here, right? But one might have thought that if you have this bucket of water that people, even nowadays, would put the bundle, the lulav bundle in, putting it in there might be included in there's an isur midairaisa to water plants when they're connected. There is sometimes an Isur D'Rabbanan to water plants when they're not connected. That Isur does not apply to the Lulav. You can put it in a bucket of water. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, very importantly, he doesn't argue with the Tanakama, but he expounds upon it. He says like this, on Shabbos, like the Tanakama, you are allowed to place back the Lulav bundle in water, but, like Rashi points out over here, you are not allowed to add water in that bucket. Why can't you add water? So there's a general concept of you can't make exertion that's not needed on Shabbos or on Yontif. And then there are levels to it. There's what's called tircha, and then there's what's called tircha yeseda. There's what's called minimal exertion, and then there's called a lot of exertion. So on Shabbos, you cannot add any water. Even minimal exertion is not allowed. B'Yom Tif, then not only can you put it back into water, but you can even add to the water. It's some sort of tircha. It's called a minimal exertion that's allowed. And ubemoyed, meaning on chalamoyed, we even allow you to do real exertion. What will be real exertion? Exchanging the water. Machlifin. Final din of the Mishnah. Koten hayodeya linaneya chayev belulav. From when is there an obligation of chinuch to train the child to shake? One might have thought, well, generally when it comes to mitzvahs, the rule is when the child is old enough to get it. What is the minimum mitzvah? To take it together. You don't even if you didn't wave it when you took it. We go on miftzayim. The person is yoytze the basic mitzvah. So one might have thought that from what age is the age of a cotton being mechuyev and chinuch lulav? When he's able to take it, which can be very young age. Says the Mishnah, no. that the minimum age for when there is a chiyuv on the father to be mechanech his child is when the child is old enough to know how to properly wave it. That's how much we are linking the waving with the mitzvah. So on one hand, it's not essential. On the other hand, it's very much connected to the mitzvah. Now, says the Gemara, let's go on case by case. The first case of the Mishnah is that a woman is allowed to receive the lulav back from her son or from her husband. Says the Gemara, what's the chiddush to that pshita? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you the chiddush, the tema. That hoyil v'isha lav bas chiyuvihi. Since a woman is not obligated to take the lulav ever, it's a mitzvah, say shazman gerama. And even though, like we keep on mentioning, we paskin that she's allowed to do it if she so chooses, it's not bal toisiv, but she's not mechuyev. So therefore, we might have thought ema loisi kabel, she should not be allowed to move it on Shabbos. Why? Because it's muktzah. And like we mentioned, nowadays that we never take the dalad minim on Shabbos, not even b'yom rishon, it's muktzah for everyone. So maybe for her it will be muktzah. Komash malan. That what? That since men are allowed to take it, so therefore we consider it toiras keli olav, says Rashi, we consider it a halachic utensil, and therefore, like any other keli, it's not muktzah even for a woman. Weiter. Koren Publisher. So now that our Mishnah spoke about that from what age is a koren obligated, from when he's yodeya linaneya, and this is not a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. It's from when he knows how to wave it. So says the Gemara Tanach Rabbanan, and we're going to quote here, as we see here, a lengthy Tosefta from Chagiga that's going to go through many mitzvahs. And when one wants to know from what age am I mechuyev because of the mitzvah of chinuch to educate, to train my child, it's not going to be a number, it's going to be from when he knows something. Now, yes, it's connected to his age, but we're not going to focus on the age, we're going to focus on a certain amount of knowledge. And let's go. Starting with repeating what we learned in our Mishnah. Koren hayodeya linaneya, when he knows how to wave the lulav, then chayev b'lulav means that then the father is obligated, because of the mitzvah of chinuch, to train his son in the mitzvah of taking and waving the lulav. Ulihisate, from when are we obligated to be mechanech our children to wrap themselves in tzitzis? Now guys, it's very important that the word lihisateif doesn't mean to wear a talis cotton. That is something that we know we put on when the child has his upshed inish, when he's 3 years old. Lihisatev is something beyond that. Lihisatev is Keloshan HaChazal Ka'atifas Yishma'elim. The way we put on our talis gadol happens to be that we, Minik Chabad, is we only wear a talis gadol from marriage. But let's, for example, Sfardim are going to wear a talis gadol from bar mitzvah. Well, if that's the case, like all things that come with bar mitzvah, you have to start educating a child prior to bar mitzvah. From what age? When he knows, big ashmias, how to wrap himself, ka'atifas yishma'elim, and everyone should follow their minik. Lisat chay betzitzis. Another din, from when a child knows lishmar tefillin, he knows how to guard his tefillin, meaning not to enter the bathroom while wearing the tefillin, not to pass gas while wearing the tefillin. From then, aviv loikeach loitefillin. From then, the father should buy for his son a tefillin, just laha'id, that prior to the tefillin, chayev betzitzis, right? Chayev belulav. Doesn't say chayev to buy him a lulav. Here it says chayev to buy him. Not chayiv. The father should buy him a tefillin. It makes a lot of sense, because when it comes to many other mitzvahs, you can share the item. What don't we share? The tefillin, because every yid has to daven, right? Every yid has to daven wearing, that's the minute today, wearing a pair of tefillin, especially then they wore the tefillin the entire day, so everyone has to have their own pair of tefillin. Yodei aladaber, from when a child knows how to speak. Here, we know, we quote this so much in Chasidus, Aviv loimdoi, it is from that age that the father should teach his child Torah and Kriyas Shema. Now when it says Aviv loimdoi Torah, how much of Torah, what part of Torah? So the Gemara interrupts the Tosefta and clarifies. Torah mahi, Amar Rav Hamnuna, the pasuk of Zeis HaBracha, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, that the Torah, which is commanded to us from Moshe, is your heritage. Why you? Because you're part of the Kehilas Yaakov. And as the Rebbe establishes to be the first of the 12 Sukah. And that's the first pasuk you tell a child. You teach the child when he's Yodei Ladaber. What is Kriya Shema Mahi? What level of knowledge does he have to have? Also, not when the child knows when he's able to say the whole Shema. Even only the pasuk Rishon. Once he's old enough, he's Yodei Ladaber, it's a 6-word. Same thing with Torah Tziva. Then, when he's able to speak more, then you'll teach him more in the Shema. But it's already from that even youngest of ages. And we all know that these are psukim that we teach a child way before he's 3 years old. Because a child is already Yodei Ladaber enough to know Torah Tziva and to be able to recite the first pasuk of Shema. Back in the Tosefta. Now, a couple of laws of Tum and Tara. Hayodei Lishmar Gufay. When a child is old enough that he knows the dinim of Tum and Tara. Nowadays, people don't know it as much because it's not that practical. But the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. The Meheira b'Yameinu, these will be dinim that we will be familiar with the way we are familiar with dinim of Shabbos, with kashrus. So you have to know how to make sure to keep away from Tumah. Once a child knows enough, and he knows the dinim of avatuma, and he understands how it is how he might acquire it, what contact means, halachic contact, then oichlin al gufay taharis, which means that if there was food that was previously tar, that had contact with his body, not with his hands, with his body. Hands are much harder to keep in the state of tahara because of the Shmeina Asar Davar, which included this concept that Yodayim became sheniyos, and only after you wash negel vaser and you're mindful in where your hand is moving, then you can say that your hand is still in the state of tahara. So keeping your hands in the state of purity is much harder. But it normally begins first with learning the basic halachas of Tum and Tara. And once a child is old enough that he knows how he might become Tameh, and therefore he knows how to keep his body in the state of Tara, if food that's called Taharas touches his body, you can ask him, and if he tells you, no, I'm Tahar, then you can rely on what the child is saying. Now you have to appreciate something. It's not always that we halachically are allowed to trust, so to say, the testimony of a child. But over here, being that the food item is becheskas tahara, that's what we're talking about. So really, you can rely on the chazaka. Eloma, on the other hand, well, maybe he was tamei. So since we know that he knows the basic dinim of tum and tara and he's yodei lishmar gufay, then yes, we can rely on him saying that his body is tahar, and therefore the food remains in its chazaka. Now, if he's even older and he understands the nuance of how hands can become rabbinically sheni, and therefore, and he's old enough to guard his hands, all of this you have to be older. So next, lishmer es yadav, then even more, then oichlin al yadav taharis. Then if he touched something, we also will rely. If he says, Chavra, don't worry, my hands were in a state of tahara. They were not even sheni l'tuma midrabanan. Next, if a child is old enough that when you ask him a question, Rashi says he knows how to answer, and how many answers are there for a question? Rashi says there are 3 answers, and that's extremely important. Yes, no, and I don't know. He knows all of those 3. So only then, what's going to happen, for example, if this child walked very near a dead sheretz, and we want to know whether the child had contact with the dead sheretz. Now again, we learned above that if he's Yodei Lishmar Gufay, we rely on what he answers. Fine. What happens if he says, I don't know? I don't know if I touched the sheretz or not. Since if he would have known, he knows how to say yes, he knows how to say no, and he also says, I don't know, only then do we follow the following rule. That if that doubt came about in a private domain, how it's defined for the dinim of Tum and Tara, that there's only 2 people or less in that location, then we say the rule based on the dinim of Soita, that's Feikoi Tamei. And if the same type of doubt happened in what's called a Reshus Harabim, not for Hilchas Shabbos, a Reshus Harabim for the laws of Tum and Tara, then we follow the rule that Safek Tamei b'Reshus Harabim Sveikoi Tar. However, just to speak out the contrast, if the child is not old enough and he's not Yodei Lishoil, he won't know how to answer yes or no, even if it's yes or even if it's no, then he won't automatically become Tamei if the Safek came about in a Reshus HaYachid. In other words, Sveikoi Tamei b'Reshus HaYachid, Tamei, Safek Tumah b'Reshus HaYachid, Sveikoi Tamei is a chumrah based on the scenario of a soita, and from the many comparisons that we have to the soita, is that both that man and that woman, they're Yedei Alishoil. Whether they'll be honest or not is not the point, but they are intelligent beings. Once they are unable, you can't converse with them, either because the suffix happened with something inanimate, or if it happened with a person but it's not yet Yedei Alishoel, then we don't compare it to the dinim of Soita. Then it follows other dinim, and sometimes it'll be even lenient. Sometimes a doubt, even B'Reshus HaYachid, will be L'Kula, but let's move on. Next, Hayedei Alifreis Kapov, once they were speaking here about a minor kohen. If he's old enough, he knows how to duchen with the details, he knows how to extend his hands, then cholkin loy truma bebeis hageronoi. So like this, when we were farmers, when we will go back to farming the land and having the mitzvah of giving truma somaisres, the place where many kohanim came to pick up their truma was in the granary itself. However, there's a couple of rules that Rashi reminds us. Rule number one is that we do not give in public. We don't give in public truma to a minor. Why? Because maybe this minor doesn't know yet the dinim of truma and tara, and if he doesn't know those dinim, he's not yodeya lishmar gufay. You're giving a kohen truma, and he might be metam it simply by taking it. On the other hand, once a kohen is already an adult, then we can assume that adult kohanim, all of them know how to guard their bodies and how to guard their hands from Tumah D'Rabbanan, making sure that the Tumah does not become a shlishi if it touches yadayim that are shniyos prior to washing negel vaser, etc. So Rashi says like this, that since which kohen is going to be poides kapov, which kohen will be allowed to duchen? Only an adult, a real adult, not only 13 years old, but 13 years old that already has the bodily maturity. He already sprouted 2 pubic hairs. So since he's noises kapov, everyone knows that he's an adult, and only then can you give to him truma in a granary. And if he's not noises kapov, so not to give the appearance that you are giving truma to a minor. And the problem with the minor is not that he's a minor, is that if he's a minor, how do you know that he knows how to keep the dinim of Truma and Tara? Don't give him Truma in public. Rashi adds that if we know that this child is already very knowledgeable in the dinim of Truma and Tara, even though he's a child, you can give to him Truma. That's what we just learned over here. The food is becheskas tara. He's saying that he's not tamei. If he's yedei lishmeres yadav, he's saying my hands are not tamei b'tuma shniyos. You can give to him truma in private. But if you would do it in public, since not everyone knows that he knows, it would look like you don't care if it becomes tamei. So how does everyone know if a kohen is an adult? The moment he begins duchening, that's a rai that he's an adult, because of the rule that ein katan, right? That a minor doesn't duchen. She'ein katan poides kapov. That is what our sugi holds. I just want to tell you that de facto, our minig now, at least by us, is that when you have adult kohanim duchening, because of chinuch, nowadays they come up, the children also go up on the duchen, but that's not the case of our Gemara. That's not the sheet of our sugi here. Daf mem beis amid beis. We're continuing with this amazing Tosefta regarding chinuch. Next, hayudei lishchait. Hayudei lishchait, very importantly, Rashi says, when a minor knows how to shech. Now there are two knowledges when it comes to shechita. There is the technical la'amein es yadav. He knows how to do it technically, and then there's him knowing the laws of shechita. This yodeya is not about the laws of shechita. Guys, when we learned Chulin, one of the things we learned is that if anyone is not sharp with the 5 laws of shechita, shehiyah, hagrama, hadrasa, chalada, and ikur, they're not allowed to shecht. We're not even talking about that. The child knows how to do it technically. He knows how to cut the animal. So says the Braisa, says the Tosefta, oichlin mishchitasoi, even though he's a minor, since we know that he knows how to do it, we can rely that he did it properly. And here again, the Gemara interrupts, and Amar Rav Huna, hold on. When do we say that? Only only if there was an adult supervising him while this minor was shechting. Why? Because this child, again, knows how to do the technical part. He doesn't know the halachis. So Rashi speaks about shehiyah, that he might pause. You would never know. if he paused enough time, it invalidates the shechita. Or if instead of him going back and forth, he pressed down without going back and forth, drasa, he also will invalidate the shechita. So you need to have an adult to make sure that he didn't do shehiyah, that he didn't do drasa. But we don't say, he's a minor, his shechita is not good. It's fine. If he's yodei alishchait, and there was a gadol ha'omed al gaba of making sure that the halachas were not violated, then we can eat from a shechita. Back in the Tosefta. Yachol le'echol kezayis dagan, once a child is old enough, this is really an infant, that he's able to eat a kezayis of any of the halachic 5 grains, from then on, marchikin mitzoyasei umimei raglav, then we have to distance ourselves from his excrement or from his urine for ames in order to recite the Shema, in order to recite the Shemona Esrei. Prior to him being able to eat a kazayas dagon, halachically, we don't consider the waste of his body something that has such a foul odor that this allows us to say words of kedusha within daladamas. That is the age. It's about, it's not a number. Is he eating a kazayas dagan? Then he's already considered old enough that we have to distance ourselves from his tsoya and from his meir aglaim. And here again, Amar Rab Chizda, v'hu, another qualification, if he's that age that he's already eating, he's nibbling on cookies, on bread, on anything that's made out of the 5 grains, but he's unable to eat the amount of a kezayis in the zman of achilas pras, let's say it's 9 minutes, then his tsoya is not yet considered that offensive. However, if we have an adult already, a bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, even if for whatever reason nebach, they can't eat properly, even if they cannot eat a kezayis of any product of the 5 grains within the zman of achilas pras, once you are a gadol, then everyone else has to separate themselves, has to distance themselves from their tsoya and meir aglayim daladamas to be allowed to recite words of holiness. And it's alluded to the chsiv, right? Shlomo HaMelech says, Yosef das, right? Those who have increased knowledge, Yoser Machoiv, have increased pain. We understand the pshat. But here we are applying it. Yosef das means age. There's a certain level of das that comes dafka with baram bas mitzvah. B'nei das, bar das. And the machoiv means that not that the person feels more pain, that the odor from them is more offensive. They bring about more pain. How do they bring about more pain? By this din, that their bodily waste has a higher level of a offensive odor. Back in the Tosefta. Furthermore, once a child is old enough that he's able to eat a kezayis of roasted meat, from then on, shoichtin olavas pesach, then this child may be included in the registrants, in the minuyim, over a korban pesach. Like we know that who can eat from a korban pesach only if you were manui. A katan is not mechuyev, but a father could include his minor children in the count, but he has to at least be old enough to be able to eat a kezayis of roasted meat, because the Pesach has to be roasted, like we learned above, as it says, ish lefi achlei. Now the pshat is, each person according to what he is able to eat. That's the pshat. In other words, make sure that you register enough people to finish the meat until midnight. But the drash is, that when could a person be included? If he's able to eat, period. However, on this last din, we're concluding the Tosefta, Rabbi Yehuda argues, and he says that old enough to be included in the registration of a Pesach is not whether you can eat a kezayis tzili, but it's about achiyachal levarer achila. If you are able to discern b'chlal between items, knowing what is edible and what's not edible. In other words, there's a child that's very young, that if you give him a kezayis of roasted meat, that child is able to consume it, but that child might not be old enough with wisdom, with knowledge to know, b'chlal, if 2 things are in front of him, which one is edible or not. For example, ketzad, that it has to be a child that when you give him a tzuroid, when you give him a pebble, he doesn't put it in his mouth. Children that are very young, everything goes into their mouth. He already knows that a pebble should be thrown away. Only when you give him a walnut even though he also knows that you can't bite into the walnut, you have to have someone that cracks the shell, but he knows that in there's food. He knows that there's oichel in here, and he's not going to take it v'noitli, he's going to take it. So that is an age that's older than the age of someone that's able to eat a kazayis of tzili. It's interesting.
Right. If the kid is too young, according to these opinions, should you not give him any Korban Pesach?
Well, not only, of course not. You can't give him because you can only give to people that were registered. He cannot be registered. Correct. I just want to add that we learn a lot in Hasidus that really when we eat, what's really happening, begashmi is that the body is doing the avodah of birudim. And b'chlal, before Mashiach, the main avodah, or until we finish doing the avodas of birudim is that everything in the world is a mixture of good and bad. Then when you eat it, and when you engage with it, so on the food level, the body does it. It expels the bad and it absorbs the good. So that's gewaldig. So when we're speaking about it, the same pasuk, l'chayre, Rabbi Yehuda has, ish lefi achloi, but achila means birudim. So if the child is not old enough to know, to be mavarer, to separate the good and the bad, between a tzuroid and an egois, then he's not old enough, he's not the ish lefi achloi, and he cannot be registered. Chavre, with this we say, Hadron Allah Lulav Hagazel, we will return to you Perek Shlishi, and now let's start Perek Revi. Perek Revi and Perek Chamishi is one continuum, like we spoke about in our introduction, that the holiday, the Yom Tov of Sukkot, comes with many mitzvahs, more than what we have discussed until now. Chavre, until now, all we mentioned was the mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah, of dwelling in a sukkah, and the mitzvah of netilas dalad minim. You know what else we have? We have the nisuch hamayim, we have the mitzvah of reciting the Hallow, we have the simchas beis hasha'eva. So now the Mishnah wants to point out how from all of these many mitzvahs, it's not that all of them will be fulfilled every single day of Sukkot. Actually, sometimes we will include even the 8th day Shmini Atzeres. Some mitzvahs will be fulfilled only on a certain amount of days. Some mitzvahs will be fulfilled on even less days, as the Mishnah speaks out. So let's begin with the first two. Lulav, we know, the mitzvah of Netilas Lulav. And another mitzvah. There's a mitzvah that is called the mitzvah that was incumbent upon the Kohanim, Bisman, that we have a Mizbeach standing, to walk around the Mizbeach holding a Arava. I know that nowadays, Zecher to what was done in the Beis HaMikdash with the Arava, them going around the Mizbeach with the Arava, is what we say today is the Hoishanas. And we walk around the Bima. And for the first days, 6 days of Yom Tov, we walk around the Bima holding the Dalad Minim. Right, like we just learned the Anshe Yerushalayim, they held it more than they needed it. We actually have on Hoshana Rabbah that we take our minigas five aravos, but it all originated from, again, we're going to speak about it more later, that Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash would walk around the Mizbech with an arava. So both Lulav and arava, says the Mishnah, how many days will one actually perform these mitzvahs? Either 6 or 7. Either 6 or 7. And the Mishnah itself will explain when 6 and when 7. Next, the mitzvah of reciting the Hallow. We're speaking about reciting the Hallel Sholem. You know, Pesach, we only say the complete Hallel the first 2 days. Or in Eretz Yisrael on the first day. Right? Like we have the Midrash that even though that Chalamoid is in between the first day and Shvi Shal Pesach, but by Shvi Shal Pesach, when God told the angels that my Maise Yodai Tvuim Bayam, and you're saying Shira. So because of that, we don't say the Halal Sholem, nor do we say it on Cholamoid Pesach. But by Sukkot, we say the entirety of the Halal. Now, we don't only say the entire Halal during the 7 days in Eretz Yisrael of Sukkot, we also say it on Shmini Atzeres. So HaHalel and the Simcha is referring to the mitzvah v'samachta b'chagecha. And how do we fulfill it? Bizman shebeis hamikdash chayim, by eating meat. And we ate meat from shlamim. So the mitzvah of eating meat from the shlamim is not only 7 days, but both of them are for the entirety of the 8 days. 7 days of Sukkot and for Shmini Atzeres. Next mitzvah, or next mitzvahs, Sukah, the mitzvah to dwell in a sukkah, and the nisuch hamayim, the mitzvah of, in addition to the pouring of the wine, we also, during the Talmud Shal Shachar only, not Shal Bein Arbaim, we would also pour mayim. That is done for all of the 7 days. For all of the 7 days. And now the final mitzvah that the Mishnah is going to be teaching us about is what the Mishnah calls hechalal. Hechalal means a flute. The flute, this is really connected to Simchas Beis Hashoyeva, that was celebrated also by playing live music. And live music, and by the way, it wasn't that they only played a flute. We'll learn more about this. They played many other musical instruments, but we are picking the flute as an example. It was the one perhaps that was heard more than all of the others. So since we don't play musical instruments, not on Shabbos nor on Yom Tov, so it's going to come out that it's the mitzvah of Echolol, that level of Simchas Beis HaShe'eva with musical instruments will only be for 5 days or for 6 days. Well, first of all, it's not Shaykh to Shmini Atzeres, it's only Shaykh to Sukkos. Not Shabbos, not Yom Tov. So you can chop, if Shabbos falls on Yom Tov, the first day of Sukkos always has a Shabbos in it. It's a 7-day Yom Tov. So if Shabbos, the first day is on Shabbos, so then you'll play it for 6 days. If the first day of Sukkos is not on Shabbos, so there's going to be 1 day of Shabbos and another day of Yom Tov, neither on which you're going to play the Cholol, so you're going to only end up with 5 days. Every single one will be clarified in the Mishnah. Okay, and now the Mishnah itself goes back to the first clause, which is Lulav and Arava, either 6 or 7. Lulav, Shiva Ketzad, when will you take Lulav for all of the 7 days? Again, mentioning that even though nowadays, whenever Shabbos falls out on Sukkot, even if it's on the first day now, after the Churban HaBayis, before the building of the third Bayis, we don't take the Lulav, but Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayam, whenever the first day of Sukkot is Shabbos, we did take the Lulav. So then you'll take it for all the 7 days. Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag, Shechal Liyas B'Shabbos, then Lulav Shiva. However, v'sha'ar kol hayamim, but if Shabbos falls out on any other of the 6 days, then even Bizman Habayis, you would not take it. Then only Shisha. Question is why? Again, we're going to have, that's the Gezeda that Rabba will introduce when we start learning the Gemara. Now, Arava is the same, but not the same. This mitzvah of walking around the Mizbech with the Arava is also generally not done on Shabbos. But here the exception will be that it is if Shabbos is on the 7th day, what we call a Shana Rabbah, then it's done even on Shabbos. Arava Shiva Ketzad, if Yoim Hashvi Shel Arava, which means the 7th day of Sukkot, the 7th day of taking that Arava, falls out on Shabbos, then we still take the Arava Shiva. But if the 7th day of Sukkot falls out on any other day, which means Shabbos falls out on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, and the 6th day, then on that day, in other words, Shabbos Sukkos, the Kohanim did not take the Aravis. The Shar Kol Hayomim Shisha. You know, it's gonna chop, my friends, that there was never a time in the Beis HaMikdash that both the Lulav and the Arava were taken the 7 days. Never. Because if Shabbos is on the first day, then Lulav was taken for 7. But then Hoshana Rabbah was on a Friday. Then Arava was taken for 6. If the 7th day is on Shabbos, that means the first day was on Sunday. Then Arava is taken for 7 days, but the Lulav will be taken only for 6. Weiter in the Mishnah, Mitzvahs, Lulav, Ketzad, says the Mishnah, we're going to skip the parentheses. As per the version of the Marshal, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag, Shechal Liyas B'Shabbos. So now that you're telling me you have to take the Lulav, now we have a technical problem. How do you get your Lulav to the Beis HaMikdash? Now hold on, why do you have to take your Lulav in the Beis HaMikdash? So like this, really you can take your Lulav in your house. But since we also do Nanuyim with the Lulav, and it's better to do it, right? We do it when we say the Hallow. And it's definitely ideal to do all this while you're standing in the Beis HaMikdash. So we would prefer to take it in the Beis HaMikdash. But how do you get it there? So like we learned yesterday, you have to bring your set of Dalad Minim to the Beis HaMikdash prior to Shabbos. And again, we're speaking about Shabbos, first day, Sukkot, Erev Yom Tov Shabbos. Another just a detail over here. There was a wall surrounding Harabayis. Harabayis had a din of a Reshus HaYachid. So really what you needed was not to get your Lulav and Esek, the Dalad Minim, into the Makim HaMikdash, into the Azara, but you needed to get it into Harabayis. So indeed, Meilichen es Lulaveim Lahar Habayis. And now where would you put it? You have hundreds of thousands of Jews, and Halavai millions. So what happened is that you had chazanim. A chazan again doesn't mean a cantor. Chazan means an attendant. Gaboyim, v'hachazanim, mekabla mehem, there were attendants that would receive from every yid their dalad minim, and v'soidrin oisei al gabe itztab, and they would put it on a bench. If not, it would be chaos. Now, if I get to put away my lulav, then there's a chance for me to find mine. I'm not even putting it away, which means it's very, very unlikely that I'm going to get mine back. And we learned that on the first day it has to be lochem. We'll get to that challenge in a moment. So first of all, the amcha, the younger people, the general population, they gave it to the chazanim. But as we will see, retrieving it was mamish asimchas toida. It was really a little bit chaotic. So for the elders, they put it, or we allowed them to put it in a certain designated chamber. So at least they did not have to mingle in this chaos. Now what happened? What happened was like this, is that when you give away your dalad minim, you're probably not going to get yours back. So umelamdim oisam loimer, the Beis Din, through these chazanim, they told every yid, you're giving it to us, make the following declaration, that kol mishim agia lulavi liyodoi, whoever will end up receiving this set, harei hu loy b'matana. Because if not, then no one will fulfill their obligation. Now, Lomachar tomorrow, Shabbos Yom Tov, the first day Yom Tov, Mashkimen b'chlal, because we want to do the mitzvah ASAP. Uboyim, and we would all come to Harabayas. And now these same chazanim, listen to this, chazanim zorkin oisam lifneim, they would throw the sets of the dalad minim to everyone who's coming there. And what ended up happening, something similar to what we had over there in Yuma, right when they used to go race up the altar here, it became chaos. People began to grab, and then it went from that umakin is esh, one in their eagerness to retrieve the lulav, sigegangen dort in the fresk. It wasn't safe. It wasn't a holy. It wasn't ideal. So chshero Beis Din shabola de sakana, when things got really out of hand, so they made a takana. Don't take the lulav in the Beis Hamikdash. That sheyehei kol echad v'echad noitel bebeisai. And that resolves the issue. Okay. Now, let's at least begin. Just open up the Gezerah Darabah. So what did we learn in the Mishnah? That if Shabbos falls on any other day other than on the first day, so even Bezman Habayis, you would not take the lulav on Shabbos. Now hold on, Chevra. Lifnei Hashem Alekeichem, in the Beis Hamikdash there is a mitzvah to take the lulav biblically all 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash. But if Shabbos fell out on the second day, third day, you wouldn't take it. Why not? Amai. The Havamina is maybe because we're going to classify the dalad minim as muksa. That was the biggest. Now, how can it be muksa? So there's the last Tosfos in the Amid. He says that, at the end of the day, there's different ways of classifying something as a keli. Maybe you can argue it's just plants, it's not a keli. If the worst case scenario, it's an issue of tiltul, so what? Tiltul is only an Isur Midrabanan. In Lifnei Hashem Alekeichem, you're obligated to take it for all 7 days. So Velitchi Shabbos, what's the issue here? If you're going to say, we'll make it into Muksa, that is not enough of a reason. Amar Rabba, Shema, Gzeira. This is the following decree, and this is even more chamur than Muksa. That Shema Yitlena B'Yadoim, V'yelech Eitzel Baki Lulmoid, maybe the person who wants to know how to wave the lulav, maybe another person who wants to know exactly how to hold it when you make the bracha, maybe a person who wants to know exactly when you make the bracha is going to go to an expert to clarify all of his shailas, daf mem gimel, and by doing so, v'yavirenu arba amas b'reshus harabim, you're going to end up carrying it 4 amas or more in the public domain. So therefore, in order to prevent this one Jew of violating Shabbos, look at the power of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelozeh. No Jew is going to take the dalad minim on Shabbos Sukkos. Wow. Now, a nuance. Rashi says, why are we saying V'ya Avirenu? Why don't we say that you'll do Hoitzah Mireshus HaYachid Reshus Harabim? Why are we speaking about carrying it for Amos in the Reshus Harabim? Rashi says that technically many people never kept a lulav in their house. To begin with, it was an akarmelis. You won't always violate biblical haitzah, but if you're going to go to the bucket and you're going to walk through a Reshus Harabim, even if the Reshus Harabim is in his front yard and you took it from your front yard, even if they are not a Reshus HaYachid, you will definitely violate the Daled Amos b'Reshus Harabim. And now the Gemara says, "V'hainu tamad shofar, v'hainu tamad megillah." as we learn in Rosh Hashanah Daf Chavtes, that Rosh Hashanah Shechaliyas b'Shabbos, because of this Gezerah, we don't blow the shofar. When Purim falls out on Shabbos, as we learn in Masechtas Megillah Daf Dalid, we're not going to read the Megillah. Why is that? All because of this Gezerah, Shema Yavirenu. So Koydem Kol, we're gonna pick it up from here tomorrow, God willing. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelozeh, is that powerful? Is that powerful? But just to add what Chassidus says, that it can be that we will, at the end of the day, miss the mitzvah that otherwise should have been done because of one Jew that might, God forbid, make a mistake. It must be, al pi Chassidus, al pi Kabbalah, that the ruchnius dika accomplishment that the mitzvah is doing happens by itself by Shabbos. That's how great Shabbos is. And that's the way Chassidus answers, that we don't always say Gezerah Darabah. Just one example, if Pesach falls out on Shabbos, we make the Seder. Gezerah Shema Yavirenu, there's so many questions about how much matzah, whether the matzah is kosher, dalad minim, whether it's a kosher matzah, etc. Dear Chassidus says that what we accomplish through the Seder is so gewaldig that even Shabbos doesn't accomplish it. So we have that beautiful insight, and Chevra, a lot more to be continued tomorrow.